Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Mind Dharma podcast. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matthew Sokolov, and I'm one of the founding teachers here at One Mind Dharma. And I have just a few kind of brief announcements. First, if you want to learn more about this podcast or subscribe via email, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, you can visit oneminddharma.com/listen. We also have our recent episodes up there. If you want to support this podcast, which I hope you do, you can visit oneminddharma.com/donate. There are options for one-time donations or to become a patron and support us monthly. And finally, you can join us at class.oneminddharma.com, where we have a weekly online meditation group. It's free, completely donation-based. There's no credit card forms or anything like that. And it's a great opportunity to sit with a teacher and a community around the country and world. So, in case the memo hasn't reached you, we've decided to combine our two podcasts into one podcast, the podcast of Dharma Talk and the Buddhist Guided Meditations. And the reason for this is mostly due to time and energy, or I guess entirely due to time and energy and money. It's cheaper for us to run one podcast feed, one email list, and so on. And it's also easier to maintain and manage. As you may know, I've had a lot happening, and we've had a lot happening in our personal lives. We had a baby about 4 months ago. I am the primary caregiver, and it has given me less time to podcast than I thought it would. So we've had a baby, we bought a house, and we've been traveling a little bit. We took the baby up to see some family members who couldn't travel, and my sister got married, and my other sister's getting married, and it's just been a little bit hectic. So with that, we decided to combine the talks and the meditations into one podcast. You're welcome to listen to both, or if you're just here for the meditations, skip the Dharma Talk episodes. If you're just here for the talks, skip the meditation episodes. Another new thing that we're doing to help support this podcast as it costs us money and we're kind of rethinking the finances are to take on some sponsors. And we'll do our best to work with sponsors that we believe in and really work well with what we do. So this week, the episode's brought to you by Buddha Groove. And we've actually talked about Buddha Groove before on this podcast and actually had listeners question us or ask us questions about them. They're a pretty big online retailer of Buddhist goods and malas. They offer great malas and great products. You can visit them at omdharma.com/groove. And I'll just leave that there. So, as the title of the episode would suggest, we're going to talk a little bit about the thinking mind and the wandering mind. And the reason this came up was I think a few of you caught me on Facebook Live with my sister doing her program a few weeks ago. And she had said that one of the biggest things she heard about people starting to meditate is that I can't meditate because my mind is too active or the mind won't settle down. I actually recently read a pretty simple and easy article. I'll throw it down below in the show notes from Wild Mind, Bodhipaksa's website, about the 7 top frustrations for new meditators and, of course, how to work with them or overcome them. And this monkey mind or overactive mind was on that list. And if you asked me for the most common things that are hindrances or difficulties for people new to meditation especially, I would probably list the overactive or just active mind number 1. Even if you're not new to meditation, you've experienced this. We all experience it from time to time, whether we've been meditating for a day or for a decade. The mind sometimes gets active. It doesn't want to settle the way that we want it to. It maybe just feels a little bit too energized. And this can come up in many forms, of course. It can come up as anxiety or we're thinking about the future. It can come up in the form of regretting the past. Sometimes we just fall into complete fantasy and the mind just wanders off into total nonsense. But I thought I'd talk about kind of two forms of this overactive mind. The first is monkey mind, and this is a term we often use. And you can think of the monkey swinging from tree to tree. There's an article on One Mind Dharma about monkey mind. I'll include that as well down in the show notes. But this kind of activity of the mind where it doesn't want to settle on one thing and it just bounces from one thing to the next. And even if we wanted to kind of bring it in, it feels like that monkey's just going to keep swinging. This is especially true for people new to meditation. And in my experience, it's especially true in the first few minutes of meditation. I had a teacher, Dave Smith, on retreat once. He said, I spend the first 5 minutes of every meditation trying to convince myself I should be doing something else. So this is something that many of us deal with or have to experience at some point in our meditation practice. The other kind of piece here, which could be its own episode, is there's a Pali word, papancha, which is one of my favorite words to say. It's very pleasing. But papancha is often translated as the proliferation of the mind, the way that the mind kind of can have one thought, and from there, it just gets on a roll and keeps going. We actually have an article about this at oneminddharma.com/mind. It's important, and we all deal with it in some shape, way, or form. I was at Spirit Rock recently, and Sharon Salzberg was teaching, and she gave a great example of papancha sitting, I believe, in her hotel room with no electricity, and just how the mind went to all of these crazy things. It goes to, I wonder why the electricity's out. I hope everyone's okay and everybody's safe. I wonder if it's more than just this hotel and the whole city's out. I wonder how long until it will be back on. And it just kind of rolls like that. One of the tricky things about papancha, or one of the ways we can identify it, is we'll often find ourselves thinking something kind of strange or weird. It happens to me in meditation all the time. Maybe I'm sitting and I have one thought about, like my dog is sick right now. Our dog Carol, nothing bad, just vomited a little bit today. And I sit in meditation and I remember her vomiting and I wonder how she's doing. I wonder if I should take her to the vet. And I wonder how much money that will cost. And then I wonder how much money is in my bank account, or if I've been paid from this job. I wonder if I should ask for a raise. I wonder what their overhead is. And it just goes like that, where suddenly I'm thinking about how much my boss makes, all because I was first thinking of my sick dog. And that's this proliferation of mind. It can feel like monkey mind, where we're swinging from one thing to the next. But papancha is really when the mind kind of proliferates from itself. It goes from one thing and it just kind of gets more and more active as it goes along. It's important to know, I think, that these are common things that we all deal with in some shape, way, or form. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the problem or the difficulty, because chances are, if you're listening to this podcast and you've meditated, or even if you haven't, you've experienced some form of an overactive mind. But before we go into the solutions, I do want to just offer that there's nothing wrong with you. Well, there may be things that are uncomfortable or less than ideal in this moment, but there's nothing inherently wrong with you if the mind wanders. If the mind was already perfectly able to settle and concentrate, you wouldn't need meditation. And I think that's really the kind of crucial point here. And when people ask me, and we were just actually up at Mindful Petaluma, which was formerly One Mind Dharma Center, the meditation center we founded. And it was beautiful, beautiful experience. We taught metta, and it felt like a bit of a homecoming for us. Elizabeth said it very well, that It felt more like home than anywhere else we'd been in town while we were visiting. But somebody said something like, what do I do with the overactive mind? It prevents me from meditating. And it's important to remember that meditation's a practice. It's not a competition or an opportunity to show off how concentrated you are. We come to meditation and we practice meditation to cultivate this ability of the mind and the heart. If the mind was already able to just leave those thoughts alone and come back to the present moment, you wouldn't need the tool or practice that is meditation. So I want to talk about just 3 practices that I've found useful, both myself and my students. The first, of course, is concentration meditation. This seems somewhat obvious, that if the mind isn't concentrated and it's bouncing from one thing to the next, one of the things we can do is utilize a practice that's specifically designed to help us collect the mind. Concentration meditation is often done by focusing on the breath. And in concentration, when the mind wanders off, we just leave the thought there and come right back to the breath. It may seem boring at times. It may seem, I have found myself sitting in meditation wondering, what am I doing? Like, is this really doing anything? So I know that the concentration isn't always the most exciting form of meditation, but every time we bring that attention or awareness back to the body, back to the breath, we're strengthening that mental muscle. And that's the way it's often talked about in meditation circles, a mental muscle. And you can think about it just like that. I've said it before that if you go to the gym, you can't lift a weight once and go home and wonder why that arm isn't stronger. We need to do it repeatedly, and we'll come back to this, but in concentration practice, every time the mind wanders off, it's an opportunity to strengthen that muscle. The mind wandering is like setting the weight down, or extending the limb, or releasing the tension. Every time the mind wanders, that's our opportunity to lift again and come back to the present moment. So if you find the mind wandering a lot, concentration meditation. Another thing you can try is metta or loving kindness meditation. And we'll have links down below for all of these. But metta or loving kindness is actually one of the ways that we can cultivate concentration. I myself find myself in much deeper states of concentration in metta practice than in breath practice. The second piece of metta meditation is it allows us to practice some loving kindness, some gentleness. In order to concentrate, we think sometimes that we need to stress or strain or really kind of hold the attention on the breath or the object of our awareness, when in reality, gentleness and ease lend themselves to states of deeper and more wholesome concentration. So try some metta practice. And the last thing I'll just throw out there as far as practices go is get familiar with self-compassion. So often when the mind's wandering off like that, we begin judging ourselves. We can have papancha stemming from our awareness of papancha, if that makes sense. We notice the mind's just totally gone off in whatever direction. And the thought comes up of, oh, the mind was wandering again. My mind never wants to concentrate. I have such an overactive mind. What's wrong with me? I wonder if there's anything else I can do. Do I need medication? Should I exercise? And it just goes. So get familiar with some self-compassion, even if it's just a few phrases. So when you find yourself in that moment, you can just offer yourself a phrase of self-compassion, noticing the discomfort and tending to it. The other kind of really clear tip I have as far as practice goes, and I mentioned this briefly when talking about concentration, is have some continuity of practice. Build a daily practice. And I know this is easier said than done. I'm not perfect with it either. But if we can build a daily practice or some regular practice we can return to the gym over and over again. We can strengthen that mental muscle. Just practicing concentration or metta once or twice or once a week at a meditation group, it may benefit us over the long run. If that's all you have time to do or can afford to do, absolutely. But see if you can make meditation a priority and find the time to sit for even 10 minutes a day and really practice cultivating this collected mind. Remembering that you're cultivating a collected mind. So if the mind's not collected, there's nothing wrong. Not using one moment or one period of meditation as the measurement of our meditation value. It's a long journey, not a quick fix. So then the last thing I want to offer, which is a little bit different than the concentration practice, is to understand mindfulness. In concentration practices, the teaching is just to come back to the breath or to the object of our awareness, the metta phrases or a body scan. But if we're sitting in some open mindfulness, we can make the thoughts part of the practice. They don't need to be a hindrance or a problem. This idea that we need to have a clear mind in order to meditate, I don't know where it comes from. I see it proliferated quite a bit on social media. I've heard teachers say it. I often joke that when I listen to a new meditation, which I try to do, if the person says clear the mind, I'm done. If I could clear the mind on command like that, then I wouldn't need to meditate. Meditation wouldn't be as useful, especially concentration practice. So you don't need a clear mind to meditate. Ajahn Sumedho says, everything belongs. Everything belongs in your practice. Whatever arises or passes, make it a part of your mindfulness. Bring it into your awareness and observe it. When the mind begins thinking and we notice it, our first reaction often is to kind of resist it or to judge it or to even just mark it right as right or wrong. And instead, see if you can just observe the thought and give it a one-word label. So I'll often use, if I'm doing a mindfulness practice, I'll often use simple labels like planning or future, past or regret, fantasy. Whatever, you don't have to use my words. You can use whatever feels true to you or authentic, but just note it. Note what's going on. Maybe you can note how the thought feels, is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? So when that thought of Carol, my dog, a little bit sick comes up, I could note thinking and unpleasant. Doesn't feel good to think about my dog suffering. And when we do that, when we touch the experience, especially with the thoughts, it kind of allows us to put some distance between it. We can respond to it or relate to it rather than react to it or be held by it. It puts just enough space that I can observe the thought, observe the process, but not get hooked into it and carried off in papancha. So try this. It really is incredible how once we just kind of put a finger on the thought, once we just touch it very gently, oh, that's a thought about planning or a worry that feels unpleasant. Or, oh, I'm thinking about what's for dinner, which I am a little bit right now. Thinking about what's for dinner, and that's kind of pleasant because I know we're having something I like. And this isn't to encourage or discourage any thoughts. Just because something's pleasant doesn't mean that we should encourage it. That's probably a moment of craving, and it's taking me out of my practice a little bit. But remembering this, everything belongs, rather than allowing it to take me out of the practice and out of present time awareness, bringing my present time awareness to this thought. So to recap, just way too briefly, concentration meditation, and metta meditation can be really useful to help build this mental muscle. A few self compassion phrases for when we find ourselves totally kind of worked up. Building a daily practice or finding some continuity and continuing with it, so we can return to that mental gym. And then relating to the thoughts differently, I would say. Practicing mindfulness, observing the thoughts, getting to know them, not resisting. So that's all I have for the day. As always, you can email me at matthew@oneminddharma.com. If you have a question about your practice, I'm happy to answer it. If you want to work one-on-one with me, I think I have 2 openings right now in my schedule for my one-on-one students. And remember to visit oneminddharma.com/listen if you want to subscribe via email or YouTube or whatever. You can also find the donation link there, and you can find past episodes, which are always freely available. And with that, I will see you next week.